Great. So thank you all for being here. It's really a pleasure to be with all of you, also our esteemed panelists. Thank you for sparing your time. I know these are really difficult times as well as very challenging times in terms of getting a group together and having discussions, and there's lots going on. So I really appreciate everyone being here and being able to exchange all these ideas. I'm Radhika Iyengar. I'm at the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University, and the series is with worldwide climate justice and education teaching, and it is with Bard College, and we are working on a series of a presentation series of discussions. There's the next one is happening at 4 o'clock today, 4 p.m. EDT, New York time, on ages of globalization. We've been having a lot of discussions with South Asia related groups which are focusing on climate education and SEL, including Asia Pacific. We had discussions with some scientists. We had discussions with lot of different entities, lot of different groups that are coming together with various different backgrounds, and we are hoping to have a collective vision going forward, and also have a very active listserv to see how we can take all of these discussions forward. So it will be great if we have a very, also please feel free to use the chat and share emails and contacts. I think this is the best form of being able to be in a meeting rather than a webinar, where we have like a lot of close proximity with all our panelists and our participants. So thank you for being time. Thank you for being on time. I just wanted to mention that we'll be very careful with not going over. I really want to have all our participants here also engage in discussion. So definitely keep your questions ready, or keep typing the questions as we go forward. So this panel is basically focusing on higher education. It is focusing on how higher education landscapes have been changing related to sustainability in mind. And the event is a part of series that we have been doing with a network that is being formed at the Climate School at Columbia University on climate education for a resilient future. We are one of the directors of the the network, and we are hoping to be able to focus on bringing collectives, bringing networks together to work on various different topics. And one of them is definitely role of higher education. So this panel discussion will actually be very relevant for a lot of the climate schools work and beyond, to see how higher education can be transformative in many different ways, and we can learn from each other and be able to have those networks going. So with that said, I'll ask our panelists to first introduce themselves as we go forward. And we have approximately 6 minutes for each of the panelists. I know it will not be enough to share all their extensive work, but so that we have time for all the discussions, this is just going to give a sliver of your expertise, and some questions that I've prepared will be able to at least guide the discussion in some way. And we hope that all our participants here are able to also chime in. So I'll first turn over to Daniela Tilbury to focus on the history of greening higher education. What lessons have we learned, and do you think this momentum has picked up over the years? What are some of the evidence? Maybe you can give us some examples, and just giving that historical overview. And I know you recently worked on a book which is truly fascinating. If we can, I'll try to see if I can get the link of the book, Daniela, and we can share it at the chat. And also thinking about how higher education practices or their practices need to be differently done, or can we to reshape the future of greening education? Do we have to have them work differently, and what are some of those ideas? So Daniela, over to you with your introduction. Yes.
Thank you, Radhika. I'm actually here in Latvia at a meeting of university leaders and vice chancellors talking about that very topic, what has changed over the years, and how do we move forward? I mean, this is something that we've got to a point now that universities, higher education has been engaged with sustainability since the 1970s. They were one of the first sectors to be involved in education. They put up their hands and said, we want to be responsible for sustainability. We think we have a unique and important role to play. And they've been doing that since the 70s. And the book you mentioned actually tracks their development and level of engagement across the decades. And we see a strong presence, a strong willingness, a strong commitment from the start. So your question's a very pertinent one, because we're now so many more years down the line. We're almost 50 years down the line, and your question is, is higher education and the greening of higher education gathering momentum? Are things changing? And I guess the evidence says yes. The evidence says that there has been some developments, there have been some movements, there have been an extension of interest, but perhaps not in the ways that we had first imagined. We have a scenario where, we have evidence, I guess, and this is where a recent study, not just the book, but a recent study that's going to be released on the 1st of May from the European Commission, which asked us to look at a global highlights or trends over the years, shows that greening education has been framed primarily from an operational perspective and a specialist perspective. So when universities are looking at reporting against sustainability, when they're looking about talking of sustainability, we find a few key things happening. We see that they talk about energy use, they talk about carbon reduction, they talk about campus greening, they talk about environmental audits. And this particular type of work has grown progressively over the last 2 decades, particularly. More recently, we have seen the rise of SDG rankings, the emergence of research institutes, as well as many specialist courses in sustainability that simply were not there 20 years ago. But although greening higher education is gaining momentum, I would argue it's done this within its comfort zone of its existing institutional paradigms. And that's where I have a problem with it. Because, yeah, we are gaining in terms of the technical, the operational, the specialist, because this is easier to implement, but we haven't tackled the big one. The big one is, how do we change pedagogy? How do we change the type of students, the research that's engendered, and the practice on campus so that they are closely tied together? How do we change the mindsets of students across all disciplines, and not just those that are just studying water, those just studying health? How do we do it right across the piece? And how do we engage with our communities with living labs and problem solving in a meaningful way? And so, to just finally answer this question, I would say that we've done a lot of greening. We know what greening means. We understand that universities have a strong position in greening, but we have not really gone deep enough or wide enough. So we are faced with a situation that sustainability has become like an add-on and not necessarily a reform agenda. And so that is the leadership gauntlet that sustainability is throwing at university leaders, at students, at staff. How do we move beyond the technical and specialist expertise to look at the ethical leadership, the social imagination, and the courage to deeply green higher education?
Thank you so much, Daniela. I think you leave us with a lot of provocations and a lot of different thoughts to see how we can use some of these thoughts going forward. Is it still an add-on? Is it vital? How do we do this? Thank you so much for those thoughts. So I'll ask now maybe Deborah Rowe to talk about her role at HESI, which is UN-supported higher education sustainability initiatives, that is taking a lot of focus on greening accreditation. So could you please talk about HESI and the role that it has in shaping education, higher education especially, and also What are some mechanisms to share best practices among institutions that you've seen that have been successful, and any evidence on how they've kind of used your recommendations, Deborah?
Great. So I know I only have a few minutes to give a lot of useful, practical resources and good news about trends. And I absolutely agree with what Daniela said, that this has to be a reform, that to give anybody any kind of a degree or certificate from higher education where they are still illiterate about our sustainability challenges and don't have the skills to engage in solutions, that is shameful. That's incomplete. That's higher ed not meeting its purpose, preparing people to help create a better society for all of us. So we do need to move forward in that core way of ethical leadership, social imagination, and the courage to do those reforms. But let me tell you now about some good things that are going on. So the Higher Education Sustainability Initiative is 10 years old, and it is 10 United Nations agencies that came together to work together on putting sustainability across the board in higher education. And this is, of course, in operations and in curricula, but it's also in the kind of policies that higher ed leaders advocate for. It's also in the community partnerships. It's also in the purchasing and helping to support the building of the circular economies. There are many, many places. Professional development for the educators is key, and also for the staff, but also to bring in the head of the city, the regional government, the earlier K-12 school districts, the chambers of commerce, the major charities, and of course, those charities and nonprofit organizations that are geared towards sustainability. And together, we use something called the 4Ps, build a compelling shared vision for a sustainable future. And it's not hard to do those sessions. And then people get excited about this preferred future that they've chosen. And then you've got to do work groups to help them use the leverage points that exist for systemic change so that we can actually get there. And the good news is I have a toolkit that you can use that we did for the Clean Energy Ministerial on this. But let me get back to starting with HESI. Go ahead and join HESI. It's right there in the link that I just put into the chat. It's the Higher Education Sustainability Initiative. You can join whatever organization that you're a part of. It doesn't cost anything, and you'll just get more information. We don't have it all, but we've got a lot of useful things for you. So we have action groups. So if you go to the HESI page and you scroll down, you'll see a gray bar across, and one of the items is action groups. One of our action groups focuses on AI, what it is doing in higher education and what it could be doing that it hasn't done yet. Then we also have an action group that is run by and focuses on students and their views of the world and what we need to do to meet their needs to build a more sustainable future. And then I run the Education for Green Jobs action group. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then we also have the SDG Publishers Compact Fellows group that I also started and co-chair with others. And we meet every Tuesday, and it's academic publishers. And we have about 20 fellows from around the world. We also have librarians and faculty and researchers and others, but it's really the academic publishers. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit too. And then we also have a ratings, rankings, and assessments group. How do we measure what's going on and make it better? And how do we make those measurements better? So let me talk a little bit about the Green Jobs group, Education for Green Jobs. It was kicked off with a global guidance document that was written by us at the U.S. Partnership and by UNEP, the UNEP YEA group, Youth and Education Alliance, and it's on educating for green jobs for youth. Lots of very useful resources there, and also just perspectives on how do you approach this. There's a great section on 3 ways to get a green job, which a lot of young people need and they don't understand. but a lot of other useful resources there too. Then we also went to the Clean Energy Ministerial. So we're change agents, right? So we go to mainstream organizations, we nudge them and say, you should be doing this work. So we nudge them about workforce development for a green and sustainable economy. We put together a toolkit. And if you see in the link where I introduced myself, if you just scroll down and go to Education for Green Jobs on the HESI website, you'll then see in there the information on the toolkit that we created for the clean energy ministers on how to build a multi-stakeholder coalition to do effective workforce development to close the workforce gap that we have for the green and sustainable economy. And then also a list of resources. We did this, we had people participating in our series of solution summits with people from over 100 countries. And so that's been moving along. And then we also, with multiple 3 action groups from HESI, we put together a convening of accreditation organizations and quality standards organizations. We had registrants from over 60 countries, and we compiled resources on how to make this criteria. You've got to institutionalize it, right? You don't just want it to be a trend from champions, which it's been for a long time. So make it part of accreditation. And so we have compiled resources for you on that as well. And we're working with Daniela on her great work moving forward. We want to have a community of practice where people can come and say, this is how I'm institutionalizing sustainability into my higher ed institution, into the criteria for accreditation from the accreditation organizations, and also the quality standards. And then we also have the SDG Publishers Compact Fellows. It came out of a compact for publishers. Over 200 academic publishers have signed it and other publishers, but we felt like it wasn't enough. So I put the link in there and Gerald just put it in. He's one of the fellows. Thanks, Gerald. And it goes directly to the top action tips. Now, these top action tips focus on getting research in higher ed out of its silos and moving it over so that it's connected to practitioners and policymakers, so that the practitioners and policymakers can inform the research agenda. So we're researching those things that are needed to meet the Sustainable Development Goals, sometimes to do the research with the practitioners so that it's more boots on the ground and reality based, and but also to get the implications of the research out, because lots of times it's behind subscription paid firewalls. So, for example, we're suggesting that anytime an article is written that's relevant to the Sustainable Development Goals, and we hope journal editors and push for that will do more and more issues that focus on Sustainable Development Goals types of research, that in the abstract, you include the implications for application in the real world, so that the practitioners and policymakers know whether or not they should read the rest of the article and can get the essence of those research results. The ratings, rankings, and assessment groups from HESI also has some good guidance documents on how to do better guidance, better ranking, better rating. We know those are imperfect and can be improved, and so do the people who run them, and they've been coming to the meetings, which is great. In terms of your question, what are some mechanisms to share best practices among institutions? There's a lot out there. And you can go into Google Scholar if you don't have access to the journals, you're not at an institution, and put in those topics. We're also doing bibliometric work to make it even easier to find. But I would say one of the places to start is go to ASHE. ASHE stars, I'll put the link in when I'm done, the benchmarking there. They have a benchmarking tool where you can look at all of these institutions that have already reported on what they've done on the operations side, on the curricular side, on the leadership side, community partnership side, advocacy, and you can see what they've done and did they get a high ranking, and you can compare and be motivated. They also have a hub of over 13,000 resources. I've told you about the resource lists that are available through the HESI action groups, and encourage you to join HESI. We're going to have a forum in May. And I'll stop there. Thank you. I know I'm a bit like a fire hose and I talk fast, so put your questions in the chat.
That
Thanks.
was a lot of information, Deborah, but I think all very relevant information. We will take time to digest all of the great work, and I hope that the participants here are able to join the HESI listserv as well as all the resources that Deborah has put forward. I think such a wealth of knowledge here. And it's amazing that there's a lot of momentum. So that was really positive to know that there is a lot going. There are many organizations, many institutions a part of HESI, and hoping that there'll be many more after the session today. I know Claudia is here as well. She's an AI expert. Claudia, definitely, that was a good example of, Deborah showcasing all of the AI work also. So maybe you can also participate. So I think, thank you, Deborah, for giving us that overview. I think it was a good overview to get into some of the contextual information now. So I just wanted to ask Olivia Copsey is here, does a lot of programming of higher education on the ground with a lot of different institutions. And as we know, greening education is very contextual, and there needs to be a global framework that supports these exchanges of next best practices, as well as what are some of the pathways do you think, Olivia, are able to accomplish both getting the global framework as well as getting the contextual information and making it relevant to different institutions. So maybe if you can touch upon that. And then also universities teach a lot of variety of subjects, and we wanted to know if you have recommendations on a core curriculum on the environment that can be taken up by students and institutions, and or should this greening of education be infused in all the different subjects, and maybe some mechanisms of doing that, and what are some of the examples that you've seen on the ground that showcases some of these practices. But I would first ask you to do an introduction, maybe very briefly, so that we can get onto the topic. Thanks, Olivia.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Radhika. And thanks, Danielle and Deborah. Lots of really important information there, which I think I have to say we'll definitely draw on and chime with. So I'm Olivia Copsey. I'm Director of Education at the Foundation for Environmental Education. We have several programs, global programs for environmental education. The two that I'm responsible for are the Eco Schools program, which is in over 50,000 schools in 100 countries. And when we have our Eco Campus program, which has evolved alongside the Eco Schools program for 25 years. And we are now in 19 countries and just over 200 universities. So a lot less universities working on Eco Campus than we have schools working on Eco Schools. And that, I think, is part of our challenge and part of what we're seeing in terms of the importance of a kind of a contextualized approach and a different way of working with higher education. And it's very clear across the countries where we're working that there's no one size fits all. At the systems level, local cultures, governance systems, and educational priorities all shape how higher education for sustainable development is prioritized country to country. And then on an institutional level, there's a huge variation in the types of higher education institutions, further education, vocational schools, TVET. And the huge differences between how those different types of institution operate and the activities that are happening on their campuses, the kinds of buildings that they have, the kinds of facilities they have access to, the budgets they have, the staff they have in place to manage these kinds of programs, the governance, the kind of management systems and people alike, and then also very importantly at the institutional level, what different types of environmental and climate change realities are they facing every day. And so country to country, these also have a huge impact on how higher education institution can respond to sustainability. And then, of course, this is something that we find really important. Again and again, it's the micro level differences and variations. So the sort of relational aspects, the interpersonal interactions, the behaviours, the relationships between students and the faculty and the management, how students feel in terms of their ability to make change, how different staff feel about sustainability itself. So all of these different kinds of dynamics make a huge difference in terms of how an organisation can embed sustainability successfully, and what happens with it when it starts to work on that process. And as Deborah mentioned, there's lots and lots of different frameworks for doing it. You know, there's HESI, there's the AISHI stars, there's many more. Daniela's had a great deal of experience with the UNECE guidance and the development of the whole institution approach, and that we also use in our Eco Campus programme. So focusing on, regardless of the different type of institution you have, trying to use a basic framework, which is looking at facilities and operations. And Deborah also detailed this in her contribution. The facilities and operations, the curriculum, the interactions with the community, and also the governance of the institution, and how all of that is integrating sustainability and ESD. So we know that there's really good frameworks that exist, but what we found, and as Daniela said, excellence, you know, there's absolute excellence and plenty of examples in different institutions, but what we don't see is this bravery. I love the way you put it, Daniela, this kind of ethical leadership, the courage to do these reforms, and the social imagination needed to create a new norm and mainstream these practices, so that it becomes a basic level in any different type of higher education institution. And that, I think, is the main driver behind the Greening Education Partnership, which was launched by the UN a couple of years ago, and it's been coordinated by UNESCO. And the members on this panel are part of the coordination group for higher education, which I think is why we've all been brought together today. And we're trying to work through in a group what's needed to contextualize the Greening Education Partnership for higher education. Where are the gaps? You know, the Greening Education Partnership produced a Green School Quality Standard, which aimed to create a basic level of performance, which they hope that 50% of the world's schools and higher education institutions will adopt by 2030. That's a huge target. And it's not just adopting, it's getting accreditation to a type of program which offers that, which kind of gives the accreditation there. So that's an enormous target. And what does that mean for higher education, and how can it be achieved? And that's something that we're having really interesting discussions about as a group, and then also within the wider JEP working group, to try to understand what that can look like and what the outputs are needed from us all in order to try to achieve that. So that is where we are. That kind of will hopefully create this basic framework that we have to create sort of, or achieve a new norm. And that's the idea, that these things will the good practices and this incredible, immense knowledge now is mainstreamed across education systems, higher education, and that's the important thing, and what we're all aiming to do. So I 100% agree with Deborah and Daniela in terms of that this is a big task, and where we're all moving towards. And then if I can have quickly some time to answer your second question, which is also really a really good and important question. And the question was about, should it be core curricula that all students are doing in terms of sustainability and climate change, or should it be embedded across different disciplines and disciplinary subjects? And I think my answer would be both are very important, both are needed, and that the two are complementary, not contradictory. Definitely, I think, as Daniela mentioned, when we're looking at embedding sustainability, it isn't just operational, you know, and it's not necessarily just about curricula or expertise, but it should be about ethics. It should be a cultural approach. It should be a creative approach as well. And so therefore, these sort of, what we really need to see is that sustainability is kind of embedded into all subjects, which will and it will allow enough space to investigate fully the scientific, ethical, economic, cultural, creative aspects of sustainability in relation to the specific subject and disciplinary area that's being considered. And I think that's really important. And with what Deborah talks about in terms of the work that goes into green jobs, you know, and where all of these different industries are now kind of rotating their subject matter and maybe their vocational training around sustainability, or at least hoping to start to embed that through the different subjects. But at the same time, we need a common language and a common understanding so that we can talk about these important climate change and sustainability issues from the same anchor point. So I think that having a standalone sustainability course to put everybody on the same page is also really important. And in terms of useful frameworks that we've seen happening in the universities where we work, the SDGs, again mentioned by Deborah, are used really effectively as a kind of a mapping tool and a framework, so that higher education institutions can understand what's the big picture of sustainability and how is it communicated and embedded throughout across our different disciplines and our different teaching, so that it becomes a tick box necessarily, but it is quite useful to map, because some of these are immense, and there's an awful lot to consider, as we know. So the SDGs have been really useful, but I'll just quickly mention another couple of things that come out to us again and again within universities in terms of a need to be considered within kind of pedagogical reform, maybe to do with sustainable development. One of them is consideration of a new kind of biocentric viewpoint. How is that seen and embedded and reflected in course curricula? And that is something that we hear a lot from students, but also from some, different parts of the campus, is to say it's the content is all very well, the behaviours are all very well, but something important needs to underpin that, and that's to do with a kind of a biocentric viewpoint. And Deborah also mentioned this community connected applied research, that what is the role of the university and the university courses in doing work that's directly impacting and supporting these efforts outside of university. Student leadership is really important, because students really want to have a voice, and they really want to be part of driving the efforts of sustainability at universities and colleges, but at some point it has to also become embedded in the governance of the institution. So I'm really interested to see where does that where does that transition happen, or how do we allow for both, you know? So the students sometimes are the ones to get it started and really driven, but then do they hand it over, or do they continue to drive it, and how do we ensure that they're able to do that? And lastly, the very important issue of the kind of epistemic justice aspect. And when we're talking about sustainability and looking at sustainability within content, within the ways that universities are operating around sustainability, that whose voices and whose knowledge are we really listening to and taking account of? So I hope I didn't go on too long, but that was my answers there.
Thank you, Olivia, and thank you for mentioning the Greening Education Partnership platform also. I think UNESCO is doing a lot, and of course, and created all these working groups. I think that's also another, apart from Deborah's list, will be a good list to follow. Greening Education Partnership, UNESCO's, all the activities that they've been doing and being a part of their webinars. I'll ask Subarna to give some examples, Subarna from Malaysia, in terms of, how should university professors be best supported in ESD by the institutions? And if you can give some examples from Malaysia on ESD, on some challenges that are associated with this movement, or some examples that you can share. Oh, great. So you're sharing maybe like a framework or something applicable from Malaysia. That will be great, Subarna. I think you're muted.
Okay, you should be able to hear me now. Yes, okay, all right. Thank you so much, Radhika. Yeah, it's about 10:40 now here in the evening in Malaysia. And I'm really, really happy to be on this panel with so many knowledgeable experts in sustainability and ESD. And I also see a lot of familiar faces in the participants engaged today with us, a lot of experts as well. So as Radhika mentioned, what I'll be sharing with you today is some work that's going on in Malaysia now with regards to sustainability and ESD, particularly within the higher education context. So I just want to start off by saying that Asia, the Asia Pacific and Malaysia is actually now a very, very interesting place to be in, because change is happening at quite a rapid pace in higher education. So I thought before I share practical examples on the ground and some of the challenges that we face here, I thought I'll share with you a little bit first about the policy context for this work, and also how the transition has happened throughout these years, and what we are hoping to see more happen here in Malaysia particularly. So a lot of work that we do here in the higher education context in Malaysia with regards to sustainability or ESD has been in silo. So why I say silo is because, we tend to work within our own institutions, and work is very centered around either the environment or the economy bit, very little on the society bit. And ESD has only just recently caught up in the past maybe 10 to 12 years. Now, in Malaysia, we're very driven by policy. So those of you who are very familiar with Malaysia and how the education ecosystem in Malaysia works, you would understand this really very well. So what I've here on the first slide is actually our key shift areas in higher education in Malaysia. So I have two graphics, sorry, here. So the one on your left is basically the higher education blueprint 2015-2025, which is coming to an end this year. All right, so if you look at these graphics, you will see that there are 10 key shifts, and sustainability or ESD is not really mentioned very, very explicitly as one of the key shifts in the blueprint, right? Now, moving forward, starting next year, so 2026 till 2035, as you can see, there is going to be actual emphasis placed on sustainability, but in the form of planetary health. So we are very excited, those of us working in this space, we are really excited because for the first time, we are actually seeing a key shift very prominently addressed within the policy document, right, for higher education. But what I also feel personally is, on paper, things are really very beautiful, but what happens when you're actually going to be executing it? So I'm really hoping we are going to be able to see action plans that are also sustainable in nature to take us through the 2025 to 2026 to 2035 phase. Okay, so that's just giving you a little bit of policy context. So now when we talk about sustainability and ESD within academic programs in Malaysia, Malaysian universities, we draw back to qualification standards, right? So we have this qualification standard called the MQF, or the Malaysian Qualifications Framework. Now it's really very exciting because it's aligned really very well to the new blueprints that's going to come out next year. So just last year, somewhere late last year, the MQF published new guidelines where, and this is why I'm really very happy about this, where ESD is mentioned explicitly in the qualifications framework. So what this means for us now is all institutions in Malaysia offering higher education degrees will have to include or pay emphasis to value-based education and ESD in the accreditation standards now. So this is really very, very exciting news for us. But again, my key question is, how are we going to be operationalizing this, right? So that's a little bit about Malaysia. From a policy perspective, Radhika wanted me to share some actual examples on the ground. So I will share with you now some work that's happening in my institution, the University of Nottingham. So I'm sure you are familiar with the University of Nottingham. We are a British institution, but we've got presence in 3 countries: UK, Malaysia, as well as China. So we have a beautiful strategic plan where the SDGs feature very, very prominently in the strategy. And those of us in branch campuses, I'm from the Malaysia campus, and colleagues in the China campus, we draw upon the UON strategic goals to develop strategies for the branch campuses as well. So within the Malaysia campus strategy document 2022 to 2026, our work is very, very much guided by sustainability and by ESD, and these feature very, very prominently in our teaching and learning, in our research, as well as with our environmental sustainability strategies. And where possible, we integrate, we align between these 3 big aims within the institution, so our students get the ideal student experience when we talk about sustainability and ESD. All right. So just a little bit more detail of how we operationalize this at our institution. So what I'm talking about now is solely the work that we do in the Malaysia campus, because I'm the ESD lead for the Malaysia campus. So examples that I'm sharing with you are based on my experiences driving ESD in my campus here in Malaysia. So first and foremost, through the strategy, and particularly for teaching and learning, we have an initiative called Curriculum Nottingham, where moving forward since last year, I think, moving forward, all new programs that we develop will have, not will, but must have elements of sustainability and the SDGs attached to program outcomes, module outcomes, and all. These are for new programs. But existing programs, we are also looking at revising the learning outcomes in the Malaysia campus at least, and also what you call revising these learning outcomes to embed elements of the SDGs inside. It has not been easy, all right? I'll need another hour to talk about my experiences just with that, okay? But it's really very, very exciting nevertheless, all right? Now, besides that, as the University of Nottingham, we've been working towards, CPD, right? Continuous professional development for our academic staff and also for our professional services staff. So you are going to be, so if I'm a student and if I go into the university, it's not only my lecturer who is capacity built, but also support staff working in academic programs or working in research, they are also capacity built. Okay, and we've also developed resources, but these are internal resources at the moment. We've got a sustainability toolkit that we have developed, and this is shared across the three campuses. Now, besides that, we've also been running Sustainability in Action Week. So every year, sometime around March, April, May, we run these Sustainability in Action Week. And one of the main highlights of the SAW, as we like to call it here sometimes, is the SDGs teaching sessions. So during the teaching sessions, what we encourage our colleagues in the Malaysia campus to do is to just take 5-10 minutes of a lecture or a tutorial or a workshop or a lab session, whatever they're doing for that particular week, and spend that 10 minutes just talking to the students about SDGs relevant to that particular module that they are teaching or that particular lesson for the day, make the connections so that students see how that particular module is aligned to sustainability or the SDGs in general. So we have run this since 2022, in fact, and the next round is going to be happening in May, fingers crossed. Yeah. And also besides that, as part of our initiative to support students' bottom-up initiatives, so we've also been giving out small grants for students to run projects either on campus or off campus. So on-campus projects, examples of on-campus projects would be students have actually worked on waste separation initiatives. We're actually now working towards a policy for the cafeterias to go plastics free, single-use plastics free, and these are all driven by students for students, right? So we are really very, very proud of our students for taking this challenge up, and students working on policy. That's really very, very commendable.
Sorry, Subarna, we will not have a lot of time, and I just want to be aware
Okay.
of the questions, but if you can complete in maybe a minute.
All right. Okay. So here I just have a few examples of how we do ESD advocacy in our campus. So as you can see, maybe lots of pictures here, don't worry about that. But just look at the list I have at the side there. So the ESD advocacy that we do is within and beyond the campus in terms of capacity building for our academic and PSS staff. We have curriculum innovation. So we have a UNESCO chair that's also very involved in ESD capacity building. We've also developed a new foundation program on sustainability, which is interdisciplinary. So Olivia got that question just now. Yeah, so we are launching this module at the foundation level because we want to give all our students the basics of sustainability before they go into the undergraduate program. We are, of course, also involved with the GP and the FEE. We are a member of the Eco Campus, and we are also members of the Prosper.net. Now, in terms of challenges, I'm going to be speeding up here. This was Radhika's second question. So I think, as I said, Asia is a very, very interesting place to be in right now. We are a lot of institutions, not only in Malaysia, but across Asia. You see us in the rankings now, especially the THE sustainability rankings. So that's really very exciting. And that's why I say we are evolving very, very fast here. Some other challenges, I think, when universities, we develop university strategies, we tend to think about it from a very silo mindset. So I think there is a need for us to think about strategies from a whole systems approach rather than just a whole institutions approach. And we had a long chat about this in the GEP meeting previously. Most of our speakers mentioned this earlier, the need to move towards inter or transdisciplinary academic programs, and we are trying to do that. This is highly very challenging because you know how academics are, we are very discipline centric. All right. And just two last thoughts. SD and ESD is not just for the sciences, it's for the non-sciences, it's for everyone. So we need to get this kind of thinking started. And in my school of education, we've been doing this since 2023. Very challenging, but we've done it. And I think there's a need for us to think beyond Agenda 2030 already. But I don't see much conversation surrounding this. So I will end with this and hand the session back to Radhika. Thank you.
What fascinating examples from Malaysia. Very nice to see all the policy level work as well as on the ground. So amazing. Thank you so much, Subarna.
Thank
I just
you.
wanted to give the mic back to Daniela. Daniel, you got a very little time to share your thoughts, but I just wanted to get your idea on a question that Kareen posted on the chat, which talks about launching sustainability education certificates. And again, this is given the political scenario and other things, and there's a lot of pushback. And then how do you, manage the political aspects as well as pushing the climate agenda forward and the sustainability agenda forward. Kareen, do you want to add in more? Did I do justice to your question, or did I completely destroy it?
No, that's great. Thank you, Radhika. No, I appreciate that. I mean, and thank you for all of the beautiful ideas. And we may need, we as the ones in the US, we may need your support going forward in the next few years. But working for an institution currently, and I'm actually moving to another institution this summer that are launching or about to launch master programs and certificates. There's a lot of thought put into this where, do we change the framing? Do we adjust? Do we forge forward and sort of against the political? It's very difficult. If anybody has some thoughts around this, I would love to hear it.
If I may come in, I think the really important thing here is that we have the quality frameworks. This is something we're trying to do at the UNEC and the Higher Education Greening Partnership, which is that we agree on what we define as quality in this work. Because let's face it, there's lots of really interesting and creative things going on in higher education. We've heard some today, but I think the real challenge is to ask the question, what difference is it making? Because sometimes it's very exciting and very interesting, but it might not be educational, or it might not be environmental, or it might not be. So, we need to ask the question, what difference is it making? And that's where the quality framework, if we agree, we think that this is the minimum quality that has to happen when we're talking about this type of process, this type of work. It doesn't matter what the political intervention is or what the currents of change might be. Those questions should be relevant across that piece. So I think that that's where our energies need to be focused on. And there's some very interesting work from Scotland, for example, that I've posted recently in LinkedIn, and some really good standards, teaching standards from Hungary as well, that are also, and some video recordings from students who are assessing the quality of their experiences in sustainability from the University of Gloucestershire. So if you follow our LinkedIn Higher Education Greening Partnership group, you will see some very, very tangible examples of what it might look like in practice.
Thank you, Daniela.
Thank you so much, Daniela. Thanks, Kareen, for the question. Maybe time for one more question. But before that, I want to have David's discussion on thank you, David, for hosting all of our series. We're very grateful, and you are doing a fabulous job of elevating all our thoughts to bringing in so many different, institutions together and dialogues and debates together. So just an overview, maybe for just 2 lines on how do you see things change, and do you see that there's a big momentum that is going on greening institutions?
Yeah, thank you. A lot to be said. I'll be very quick though with the time. So this event is part of Worldwide Climate and Justice Education Week that is taking place around the world with over 500 classes, more than 70 events. And earlier in the chat, I put in a link to sign up for virtual events that will continue through Earth Month. Today is our first ever Worldwide Climate and Justice Education Games Day. And so we encourage you to take some time today and explore the dozens of games about education and climate education and sustainability as creative ways to get people to involve. And so I think the key sort of is we need to be working both at the systems level, as Debbie and Daniela and others have talked about, and then also really at the individual level, because there are thousands of educators around the world, tens of thousands probably, would like to be teaching about education for sustainability and climate justice, but they need encouragement, they need curricular resources, and they need opportunities. And students are ready for this. And so we need to meet the challenge both from the bottom up and from the top down.
Thank you so much, David. Maybe one more question from anyone who would like to ask, and maybe one very quick question since we are almost out of time.
Radhika, there's a question in the chat from Oyi. I hope I got your name pronounced correctly. What are the panelists' perspectives as to whether accreditation schemes should be mandatory or voluntary for HEIs? Maybe I can answer from Malaysia. So for us here, accreditation is really very, very important, particularly for programs that are very STEM focused, like engineering or even medicine for that matter, because in engineering, for example, our country is a signatory of the Washington Accord. So all countries participating in Washington Accord will have to abide by certain standards. So why that's important is because then if I'm a graduate from Malaysia in engineering, I can go and work in another Washington Accord member country as well with the same degree. So that is why it's really very important in Malaysia at least, and it depends on the program as well. So that's my short answer to that. I don't know what the other panelists, maybe they have other views.
My short answer is really short. It should be mandatory. It is shameful to give out any kind of a degree without educating our students about the societal challenges we have regarding building a sustainable future and giving them the skills and practice of experiences so that they can engage in solutions. We have too many students who are apathetic, who are doomed and gloomed, and that is not where we want our next generation to be. So it's high priority. And I would say, yes, absolutely, let's require it. And more we see that happening.
Thank you, Deborah. Are these accreditation systems, maybe they need to be online, sharing with different countries, all those aspects need to be there. Daniela, last word, and then we can.
Yeah, I think this speaks to the quality and standards point that I made before, that we need to have not just institutions themselves certifying that they're doing a good job, that we need to have sector bodies that regulate this, sector bodies that look into, encourage, support, and call out when there's greenwashing. There's a lot of greenwashing going on, and we need to be really careful, because it's going to damage all the work that we've been doing for many years. So, you know, certification's important, quality and standards, but we need to have some frameworks that are agreed and monitored, rather than auto-generated by institutions.
Thank you so much, Daniela, and thank you all the panelists and all the resources that are, I can see our chat has been like, you know, busy with a lot of different discussions there. And thank you so much for all the participants who've been able to come here, share resources, share their, you know, amazing experience in the chat and asking questions. I really value this discussion, and I hope that we continue in various different forums again, maybe with the GEP, higher education, panels and workshops that we will all be involved with. Thank you so much for attending today, and it's really been an honor to hear all these amazing ideas, and we need to carry on the momentum. This is for sure. I think there is an urgency that we see amongst all the panelists speaking here. We need to carry it on and see how we can expedite it using all the different resources that are already out there. So I urge all of us to, you know, continue the exploration in terms of what resources are out there, so that we can fast track our learnings as we go forward. Thank you so much for joining and spending your time today. Take care.
Thank you
Thank you,
very much,
Radhika.
everybody. Thanks,
Thank
Radhika.
you.
Thank you, Radhika.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye. Good night, Subarna. You can rest
Thank
well.
you. Good night. You have a good rest also.
Thank you.